Hey guys, Daddy Warlock, John Michael Salvato here, and we are going to begin another series into Italian folk magic, Stregoneria, and the old religion. And so tonight we're going to be sort of think of tonight's class as beginning witchcraft, 5 steps for starting your magical journey. This is going to be the precursor to the beginning of the classes themselves. This is going to be to represent for adults that are watching this an opportunity to kind of grasp the things that we as children in the hereditary tradition would have been told from the age of 5 onward. So I'm going to present the same ideas, if you will, but this is going to be in a format that adults would understand, where the way that we were told as children was simply through stories. And so if you are ready to begin your journey into witchcraft, into Italian folk magic and the folk magic tradition, then you'll want to stick around for the 5 steps for starting your magical journey when we get back. And we're back. Welcome. And to all of you who are watching this for the first time, you may want to watch the previous video to this, which I will put down in the About section as the sort of the foundational video to watch to see whether this is something that you'll be interested in. Tonight we are going to focus, as I said, on beginning witchcraft, the 5 steps for starting your magical journey. And these 5 steps represent the sorts of ideas that were, taught to me as a young person, 5 years old, 6 years old, through stories that my grandmother and the matriarch of our family, my tia Maria, would share with us. And so they would tell these stories, and stories of saints and stories of heroes, stories of the mother Diana and the father Dianos, and they would tell them in ways that kids could understand them. But what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to start tonight with step number 1, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a reading assignment, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And that reading assignment is going to tell you the story that I was told from the age of 5 onward, but in a way that, started off as a children's tale and then became a little bit, as my grandmother would tell the story again on the winter solstice, she would tell a little different details, a little more mature version, and a little more mature after that, until I was 13, at which point one hears the entire story that I'm going to ask you guys to check out. So the 5 steps for starting your magical journey as you're beginning witchcraft is: number 1, to connect with the ancestors. Number 2, to know what magic is and what magic isn't. Step 3 would be to learn the terminology. And step 4 is to find a mentor or a teacher. Step 5 is to engage your practice. And that is where our journey will begin once we go through these 5 steps. So tonight, let's talk a little bit more about that first step. And for those of you who regularly watch The Brew, then or subscribe to my channel and have seen our live broadcast, you know that this week and the week prior, we've been talking a lot as we get closer to Samhain. We've been talking a lot about the ancestors and connecting to the ancestors. And we've been talking about ancestors of blood, ancestors of time and space, and ancestors of place. And so very briefly, the difference between those. We all know what ancestors of blood are. Those are the relatives who've come before you, the relatives that are with you now, the relatives that may come back in the future, recognizing that every living being was at one time our mother in one life, in one form or another. So this idea of the sacred ancestors are those who've come before us, known and unknown. And so that's ancestors of blood. Ancestors of time and space would be, for me, as a gay male, to recognize Harvey Milk as an ancestor of time and space. For me to recognize Marcia Mason as an ancestor of time and space. For me to recognize Glenn Milstead, Divine, as an ancestor of time and space. They need not be ancestors who practiced our practice, who were on this particular spiritual journey, but that doesn't mean that they're not there waiting to help you. And then the ancestors of place. Right now, I'm in a 100-year-old home. That is our new home. And there are ancestors of this place. Not only of this physical building, but of the ground that this building is built on. Also the ancestors of the rocks and stones themselves, who, when invited, will begin to teach and whisper and sing. The ancestors of the river that runs 2 blocks away from this place, and all of the surrounding area. Those are the ancestors of place. So another word for those ancestors of place are the genius loci. And so once we understand that that's what we're talking about when we say ancestors, our ancestors of blood and spirit make up the very foundations upon which we live our lives. There's a passage that let me pull up on the screen here from the book Riding Wind Horses, A Journey into the Heart of Mongolian Shamanism. And Sarang Jarrell says in this book, the most important and most challenging way to honor our ancestors is to fulfill our personal potential and life's purpose here on earth. Many cultures maintain that we have each a unique destiny or karma to fulfill, and that we ideally make it a high priority to remember these original instructions and do what's necessary to express our gifts, our true will, and our most authentic selves. The ancestors are seen as allies in this process of remembering and as a reservoir of power and backing to help us embody our potential in this lifetime. Conversely, when we have lost touch with a sense of greater purpose, if we're fortunate, the ancestors may bring about life changes aimed to jar us into greater contact with our soul's longing and increased awareness of the agreements made before our birth. So you see, it would seem to me, I love that passage because it really speaks to me and says that we should seem to be doing the work, whatever the work looks like for you or for me. And that's the most important thing about practicing the craft. That is the purpose of practicing the craft, is to learn or remember what that reason, what our soul's longing really is. What are the agreements that we made before birth? So whatever that looks like for you, it's the most important way for us to honor the ancestors as well, is by doing the real work, the little rituals, the shrines, the lare, and other means of showing our appreciation for the ancestors should, I think, serve to underscore that prime directive, to put us in greater contact with our soul's longing and increase the awareness of the agreements that we made before this physical birth. So when we talk about connecting with the ancestors, that first step, it's really understanding what I would like to call the why. Why is it that right here and right now you've made a decision that you want to practice magic? Why is it that you want to study the Italian folk tradition? Now, for many of you, it's because there's an ancestral calling there. There's an ancestral resonance. You know that you come from an Italian or partially Italian family, or an Italo-Africano family like me, and you recognize that this is a coming into your own power, finding your own voice. And how you know that is because intuitively, you know that you have to connect with the ancestors. You know that their wisdom is being passed on to you. And so I consider myself very privileged to have this opportunity to share with you not only this first step and the four that follow, but then to take you deeper into the Italian folk magic tradition. So your homework, if you will, for this week before we do our next class on Sunday night here at Inner Alchemy After Dark would be to get yourselves a copy of either the Gospel of the Witches or *NEHR-ia, as it's known. You can probably find that anywhere online. I'm going to put some links to some translations that I particularly like, as well as putting a link to my own book. If you have not got a copy of Magic at the Crossroads, in which you'll find the Gospel of the Witches in probably one of the cleanest translations ever, among all of the other material that's in there, this might be a good time for you to go ahead and get that. So I'll put a link down below for that as well, and I will put a link to the discussion that we had this past week on the brew. For those of you who might have missed that, I'll also put the text of that passage I shared tonight. So your homework then is to go ahead and read the Gospel of the Witches. Become familiar with that mythos. Understand that that's what it is. It is a sacred tale that's been passed down to us, and it is specifically the sacred tale of the old religion. So I want to be really clear about that. I want you guys to hear what I just said. This is the sacred tale of the origins of the old religion. It's the Gospel of the Witches, and it's actually the story of *NEHR-ia. And when you read that story, a lot of the neo-pagans, the witches and Wiccan and Stregoneria practitioners, all have been told, erroneously I might add, that the Gospel of the Witches is the story of the birth of witchcraft, and that is absolutely incorrect. Witchcraft has existed since time immemorial. It is who we are. It is the energy of the universe that created the universe itself. And so to imagine that the story of *NEHR-ia is a story of the birth of witchcraft is absurd. And when one reads the story, one very clearly sees that this is a beautiful tale of devotion, a tale of devotion to Diana and to her brother Dionysus, who became her lover and gave birth to the queen of the witches, *NEHR-ia, or Herodias, if you are from the Abrahamic traditions. So understand these things. Understand that this is a story that tells us the birth of the religion, which attracted many of those practitioners of the Italian craft. So just like any religion, if you think of the Episcopalian religion, within the Episcopalian religion, you will find Episcopal priests and you may find Episcopal nuns, but not everybody who is an Episcopalian and who sets foot in an Episcopal church for worship, not every one of those people is a priest or a nun. And so just as that is the case within the covens of Diana, you found witches, but you also found, and many of those witches were the presiders, but you also found butchers and shoemakers and cooks and housewives and everything else. So be clear that in the worship and the devotion to Diana and Dionysus, the devotion that we have to *NEHR-ia, their child, we also have a clarity that this is a religion, and a religion may not be for all of us. It's the practice of that religion is something that served a purpose for me for many years in my life, and when it no longer did, I moved on. But that didn't change my practice of folk magic. It didn't change my practice of Stregoneria. And it didn't even change my practice to Benedictaria, but we'll talk about that later. So that's the homework. I'm trying to keep these first 5 sections to about 15 minutes, and I think I'm pretty close to that right now. And so we will see you next week.